everybody, this is Bridget Danner from Women's Wellness Collaborative here on Women's Wellness TV today to talk about heavy periods. So there's going to be 3 parts to this lecture. The first part will be how much is too much, so how much is too much bleeding. The second is causes of heavy bleeding, and the third will be some options on what to do about it or practitioners to see if you need more help. So let's get started. So first, how much is too much? Well, you probably get a sense of this pretty easily on your own, but it's too much basically like if you're soaking tampons and pads for more than 3 days. So really the kind of typical moderate amount would be you're really soaking a tampon or a pad about 6 times, and the rest of it would be lighter flow. So if you feel like, it's 4 days of really soaking and you can, barely leave the house. Many women are wearing a pad and a tampon together, can't wear certain outfits, soaking through their sheets, that kind of a thing. That's too much. So it's too much if the amount is too much, and also if it goes on too long. Like if you're having a period that's, maybe lasting 10 days, but just spotting, it could be okay, so to speak. But if it's heavy and you're feeling depleted and like we said, can't wear certain outfits, can't go to work, then that's too much. So these are a long list of reasons why you can have heavy periods. So let's just go over them. First one is being a teenager, or these days some girls are getting their period even at age 10 or so. And in these early years, your brain is starting to communicate with your ovaries and starting to learn how to have a cycle. And sometimes you sort of skip a month, it's a little irregular, and things can be heavier, more painful in the beginning as your body is adjusting. Second reason can be because you're overweight. So we make estrogen from our ovaries, but also in our fat tissue. So when we're carrying extra weight, we can make extra estrogen, and estrogen is what grows the lining of your uterus. And so really, when we talk more about what to do about heavy periods, we're often trying to make sure we don't have too much estrogen, because that's just more growth, and then you're gonna have more bleeding. C is chemicals. So chemicals often have compounds in them we call xenoestrogens. They look like estrogen to the body and they act like estrogen in the body. So it's another reason or source for excess estrogen coming from outside of us. So this could be in beauty products or in plastics that we're encountering, in cleaning products, that kind of a thing. D is low thyroid. So when you have low thyroid activity, there's a few things that can happen. You can make less progesterone that balances out estrogen, and you can make less binding hormone, sex binding hormone. So that means there's more estrogen in circulation. So either of those could lead to heavy periods. You can also, with low thyroid or some other causes, not ovulate. So if you don't ovulate for a cycle, or you don't have a cycle for a long period of time, the estrogen is just building up. So estrogen is what is really the strongest in the early part of our period. It causes a lot of growth of that lining, and that needs to be checked. So at ovulation, when we ovulate, then we start to make a lot of progesterone, and it sort of checks the estrogen and matures your lining. So that's what we want to happen. But if you don't ovulate, you're going to have continued growth with estrogen, and then you can end up with a heavy cycle. And another cousin of that is low progesterone. So if just your hormones are imbalanced, or you ovulate an egg that wasn't very strong, you didn't have a strong ovulation, then you might not have enough progesterone to balance out the estrogen. G is perimenopause. So some of these situations can happen in perimenopause, the years leading up to menopause. You don't ovulate every cycle. Often the egg quality is reduced, so you end up with situations of no ovulation, low progesterone. So it's very common to have a heavy cycle as you get towards menopause, or sometimes have a light cycle or an early cycle. And even though it's sort of to be expected with aging, we can also adjust it, as we will talk about in the next section. And H is for fibroids and endometriosis, 2 types of growths that are estrogen dependent. And when we have either of these, it's possible that we can have heavy cycles from those growths. Item I is birth and miscarriage. So it's sort of normal to have a heavy period after birth or miscarriage, but we've gotten some questions about it recently, so wanted to address it and sort of how much is too much. So you're going to have bleeding for, good 4 to 6 weeks after birth or miscarriage, but it should be heavy just initially for a few days and then lighten quite a bit. So if you feel like, a few weeks in, you're still very heavy or just something doesn't seem right, you can contact your healthcare provider about that. G is uterine or cervical cancer. Just imagine the word cancer here. So either of these could cause heavy bleeding depending on what stage they're in. I think you'd have to have pretty advanced cervical cancer for heavy bleeding. And uterine cancer could cause heavy bleeding sooner. I wouldn't say, these are common things, but it's good to know about, right? Because, you certainly something you want to get checked out. So there's lots that natural medicine can do for you that, can help right at home in your own medicine cabinet, but there is times to definitely go to the gynecologist and get a checkup. And K, another unusual one, is hemophilia. So this is possible though that you have some issues with clotting and you have a heavy cycle. So hopefully that would have been identified, but it could be that for some reason it wasn't identified in your family history. But we have some further information on our blog version of this article if you want to check out some of the likelihood of hemophilia. So now we'll move on to the next part, which is some things you can do about heavy periods. Okay, some of these are kind of off our last list. So item A is avoid xenoestrogens. So we learned these are compounds that look like estrogen and act like estrogen in your body, but are from outside the body from things like plastics. And it's on non-organic food because pesticide often is made with xenoestrogen chemical compounds. So avoiding plastics when you're cooking or storing food. Also beauty products can contain a lot of chemicals, cleaning products. One tip is you can look out for the word fragrance because every time you see that, that's a chemical and it's an endocrine disrupting xenoestrogen chemical. Item B is watch your weight. Now I know this isn't always easy and you might feel like I've tried everything. If you feel like you've tried everything, some things to consider are how much toxins are you being exposed to. We'll often store chemicals in our fat tissue because we can't process them fast enough. So the body just wisely stores them in fat tissue. So that can be a hidden cause of weight. And then also item C about your thyroid can be a hidden cause of overweight. You can't lose weight because the thyroid slows your metabolism. So if you also have signs like constipation, hair loss, being sick all the time, can't think straight, you can look at thyroid. Item D is herbs and supplements. So there's lots of options, but I've just listed a few here. One is the herb called Vitex or Chase Tree, and it helps the communication between your brain and your ovaries, and it can help even out a period. 2 is a compound called DIM. It's usually called DIM. It stands for diindolylmethane. And it's a compound that can be found in fruits and vegetables, but in this high amount in a supplement, it can help clear excess estrogen. And 3 is a compound called CDG or calcium D-glucarate. This is something I'm just learning about that I'm really excited about. And it's a compound that helps keep a tight bind on toxins. So as they're getting ready to leave the body, they can get unbound and then become loose in your system again. But this CDG can help them stay bound and leave your body. So both for toxins and for excess steroid hormones. So pretty cool. Item E is heal your gut. We also have some information on our various sources, podcast, website about healing your gut. And there's a pretty big relationship between your gut and your hormone health that isn't well understood, and one of those is clearing toxins and clearing excess estrogens out through your large intestine. So if you have gut imbalance, you have improper bacterial situation in there, or you're constipated, you could not be clearing excess estrogens. So that's a whole big subject, but just a few tips are chewing your food, eating a wide variety of fruits and vegetables to get fibers to feed your gut, and avoiding things like sugars and alcohol that can feed the unfriendly bacteria. Item F is try Chinese medicine. So there's some techniques in Chinese medicine and some herbs that can be helpful for that excess flow. We use some herbs to pull everything back up, or points to pull everything back up. There's a point on your big toe that if you needle it or you use a burning herb on it, can really help stop bleeding like acutely in the moment. So it's pretty awesome. And acupuncture is also great for relaxation and just balancing your system, which has to do with item G, which is I'm calling Zen out, which means to basically relax. So there's a huge relationship between stress and our female hormones as well. So stress can block hormone receptors, it can block hormone production. So usually when I talk about reducing stress, I instead talk about adding fun and pleasure, because if we just focus on the stress and say, oh, this is making me sicker, I need to reduce it, then how do you do that? You're focusing on a negative thing. But if you think, well, I want to do the things I like, I want to go out to lunch with my friend, I want to plan that kayaking trip with my husband. When you're having fun, your body responds to that with making hormones and being more balanced. So just insert more fun and pleasure and rest into your life. And lastly, I wanted to mention seed cycling, which is something we've educated quite a bit about on our YouTube channel and on our blog. Seed cycling is using certain seeds or oils the first 2 weeks of your cycle, and then the second 2 weeks of your cycle, to balance out estrogen and progesterone production and help clear toxins. So you can look up those resources on our site. And I hope that helps. I think that heavy periods are a real drag. I get it. But there is something to do about it. And if you feel like these tips aren't what's working for you, I do suggest to see your doctor if you have a heavy period situation that seems just non-responsive to your self-care. Great. Well, and we can also help you as well with a customized program at BridgetDanner.com. We've got a team of functional nutrition coaches. So if you feel like you just need some guidance, or you'd like some functional lab testing to see what exactly are my hormones doing, what is exactly going on with my estrogen, we can test and find that out for you.